Hey guys, Rob here at 3D Printscape. So recently I've been doing a bunch of videos on Cura, so I kind of wanted to recap some of it with a nice Cura tips video. So I've got about 7 or 8 tips that I want to go through. I'm going to jump over to the computer, kind of walk through them, and go through some of the benefits of what they are and how you would use them. This video is more geared towards beginners, but if you are experienced, I still think there's some value for you, so I'd recommend go ahead and just watch the video. It doesn't take that long. It's not too long of a video. I also have an article that I'm going to link to in the description below. It's a couple Cura hacks that I didn't want to put in the video, but I still think that there is some value to, so I'll link to that. If you have any questions or comments about the video, go ahead and leave a comment below, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. So let's go ahead and jump over to the computer, but before we do, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe. Thanks. Alright guys, so I'm here at the computer. I've got about 7 different tips that I want to go through. Some of them are a little bit more detailed than other, but I think there'll be benefits to everybody who uses Cura, whether you're new or have been using it for a while. The first one here is really just the scaling. Really simple little tip. There are 2 things I wanted to make a note here. You can change based on current percentage, and you can change this scaling to make it uniform or not. So if you wanted to change this to 40 by 40 by 20, you would just leave it like this and just double it. So just do 200, then you got that. But if you wanted to make it so that this is actually 40 by 40 by 40, then you're going to have to uncheck the uniform scaling, and then you can make the change. So the main thing there is uniform scaling is checked by default, but you can get exact measurements based on what you're looking for. And then along the same lines here, if you click on the object, you can right click and go to multiply selected, and you can make multiple copies of that if you're trying to print as many as you're looking for, or as many as you can get on the build plate. So let's just say I wanted to print 5 of these, so I'm adding 4 copies, so now I've got 5. And then it automatically kind of places it based on where it thinks is best. And if you move these around, if you're just dragging them on or just random objects onto your build plate, and you want it to get them to all align nicely or as close as possible, if you go up to settings and arrange all models, it's going to automatically put it back to where it feels is best. I did want to make a note here that with some larger objects, sometimes it says that they won't fit when they actually will. So if you run into that, you might still be able to try to make it fit. I think on the Cura 4.8 What's New video I did, I talked about that in a bit more detail, but there was a couple of large objects that it just put one of them off the build plate saying it wouldn't fit, but I was able to arrange them to make them fit. So just keep that in mind. Next thing I wanted to go into was profiles. So here I've got all of my Cura profiles that I use, 3 of them specific to the Ender 3, and then 2 of them more generic. If you go into preferences, configure Cura, and down to profiles, you can import new ones. So if you go to my site, which I'll link to below, you can download the profile and then just go ahead and go to import, select the file, and then it will go ahead and pull it in. And you can also clone profiles. So if you wanted to use one of my profiles as a starting point, let's say the standard quality one, you can just duplicate it and give it a name or whatever. And then you can go into that one and make the changes. So you can set that to active. And then if you make any changes over to it over here, you can save them back to that profile. That way you still have the original one as a starting point. Profiles are pretty straightforward, but I found in the community that there's a lot of people who don't really use them, and I feel that you really should, especially if you're using some of the default ones. Just clone them as a starting point and then make the changes you want if it's something that you're going to be printing with a lot. This next one here is pretty cool if you're more into darker themes. It's one that I just came across the other day myself. I've been looking for it for a while and it was right in front of my face. But if you go into preference, configure Cura, there's themes here. And then if you go to like Ultimaker Dark, it'll give you the dark theme, which is something I typically prefer to use. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. And you do have to restart Cura, so I am going to do that really quick so I can show you. All right, so the Cura loaded back up with the dark theme enabled, which I like quite a bit. There are other themes that you can download online if you're interested or if you want to go between them. I just prefer to use the dark theme, but there are other options available as well, so just keep that in mind. All right, so I went ahead and imported a fan duct cover to use for my next set of examples here. I'll link to this in the description below, but I have a video covering the install on this as well. It's a really nice fan duct cover if you're not using the BL Touch. But let's go ahead and flip this over. I want to talk about supports here for a second. So let's put this back on its side. All right, so let's say you enabled supports, and then it doesn't matter which type. I prefer tree supports just because it kind of uses a lot less filament and is easier to take off. But you want to make sure that you're using the support placement properly. So let me go ahead and slice this with support placement set to everywhere. Let me show you what's going to happen. Especially if you're not using tree support, this is going to be a little bit more of an issue. All right, so let's go over to preview. So here we're supposed to have a fan duct cover where the fan mounts on this side and it blows air through this ducting here and out both sides. But with support set to everywhere, let me zoom in a little bit here, you can see that it's actually putting supports inside that fan duct cover, which is going to block the airflow. I mean, like I said, it's less with tree supports, but if you have this set to normal, it's pretty much going to be completely blocked and none of the air is going to be able to go through here. So it's going to be pretty much counterintuitive. It's going to block all airflow. But if you set it to just touching build plate and slice it again, you'll see that it's now open and the air can travel through, but it's still building your structure that you need around it where it's touching the build plate. So that's going to account for most of the situations where you need. And then if there's a couple of placements where you want to add custom supports, I would add those separate versus trying to switch this to everywhere. I think at this point, 9 times out of 10, I'm using touching build plate versus everywhere. Before I move on from supports, I did want to make a note that I did a video on creating custom supports. I'll link to that in the description below as well. All right, the next thing I want to cover really quick is how to actually cut an object in half or at whatever point inside of the slicer. I did a video covering this if you wanted to actually cut the object and save it. I'll link to that in the description below, but there's a much easier way if you're just trying to do it for a one-off inside of the slicer itself. All you really have to do is drag it below the build plate. For example, with this, if I didn't want to print the actual nozzles here for whatever reason, I could select the object and change the positioning so that it goes below the build plate. And you can use this for example purposes, or if you're actually trying to slice at different points or trying to cut off things on the print. But now that that's done, if we just slice it and go over to preview, you'll see that it no longer has that bottom nozzle. So those are just going to be open holes there. So that's a quick and easy way to slice an object in half. And you can get the actual placement as well. So if you wanted to actually slice it evenly in half or do 25% and 50% if you're trying to print it or something, you can actually lower this, let's just say like negative 20 millimeters. You'll get the exact placement so that you can actually go back to that next time if you're trying to reproduce it or cut the other part off going forward, so you can just print the top half. All right, let me go ahead and reset that. So if we go up to edit and reset all models, I'll put it right back where it was to begin with. And before we go into the last thing, I wanted to make a note that I have a Cura hacks article just covering a couple basic things that I didn't want to cover in this video. I'll link to it in the description below, but there's a couple of good tips in there if you're interested. All right, the last one, which I did a full video on this, but it's changing the infill type or density at specific points. So let's say here as an example, if I wanted to print just these arches or whatever, these little overhangs here at a higher percent than I wanted to print everything else. What we can do is just go down to support blockers, click on that. It's going to create a box in here then we want to select that box, kind of drag it to where we want it and change the size so that it covers the area that we're trying to do. You will have to turn off the uniform scaling here. And again, this is just an example. It's not going to look pretty, but I'm just going to do like basically here up at a higher infill percentage. So Alright, so just like that, as you can see, that whole area is now selected. Then we can go to per model settings and modify settings for overlaps and select settings and choose infill if we wanted to just do infill, and then infill density. And then I'm going to change this from 20 to, I don't know, let's just say 80%. And then let's go ahead and slice that really quick. I'll show you what it looks like. So now if we go over to preview, let's go from the top view here. Most of this model is at 20%, except for when we get to the area that I selected, and this is at 80%. So what that allows you to do is selectively choose areas that you want to make stronger or change the pattern for. You can have more than one of those on a print. I just did this one as an example, but I made a test print where I had like 4 different settings in there, change the infill pattern on one of them, change the infill density on a couple of the other ones, and really just played around with it to see what it can do. And really it gives you a lot of flexibility that most people don't know about in Cura. All right, so those are some of the tips that I had. If you have any questions or comments or would like to see any other videos or have any other tips you'd like me to mention, go ahead and leave a comment below or join us on Discord. Thanks. Alright guys, so that covers the Cura tips that I wanted to go over. It's just little things that I've learned over time. I've done some videos on some of them before, but I figured it'd be good to make a good reference video, kind of bringing a lot of those together and just doing a quick overview of some of those tips just for people that are starting out. If there are any videos you'd like to see, go ahead and leave a comment below. I'm trying to build a good list of videos for my backlog so I can try to work through those. And if you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave a comment below or join me on Discord. Thanks.